So here we are in a little bit of a travel blog as I head to another town to do some grocery shopping. I'm thinking about what inspired my novel and what's coming up, and hopefully by September is a published dark fantasy work. It's called Dusklander, the Moondragon's Lament, Book 1. Right now I'm in the process of getting ready to shop it to some literary editors and agents. And when that happens, if one of them takes interest, perhaps it'll get published by traditional methods. However, I'm not very willing to let go of the creative process and, the names and art and stuff that I've been creating. So it'll really be highly dependent on any kind of contract I might receive, whether I might even sign it. Only because it's more important to me to control the work that I create than it is to get more exposure because of industry links and, schmoozing and stuff like that. Now, that all being said, I really do hope that a traditional publisher does take notice of what I'm making, because it would be nice to jump into the pool with a springboard, so to speak, instead of self-publishing through KDP, which could end up happening. That's going to be kind of my last option. That's when the September deadline hits. I'll probably end up doing that. But for the next couple of months, I'll be hitting literary agents and then have one of them go to bat for me, hopefully, if they like what I do. And then they can help start my career and help make this book series, all 5 books, happen. I can write pretty quick. I did what I did probably in about 5 months. Between October of 2025 and March 1st of 2026, I was writing the draft. And then when that was over, it took me about another month and a half to get to my final author edit stage, which I'm finishing up now. I've got maybe about 80 pages left of that. Then I'll do one final proofread, looking for any little mistake I might have not caught during my 13 proofreads and edits or so. And once I get there, then I will shop it to the literary agents. But today I want to talk about, what inspires me and what caused this story to bloom. I've talked about it before. During the late 80s and all the way through the 90s and a little bit of the early 2000s, I was a game master for tabletop and role-playing games, Dungeons & Dragons, cyberpunk, chill, horror-based role-playing. You name it, I played it, and once I really got to know the rule systems well, I started becoming a game master for those games for my friends. I had a game go off in 2000 and 2001 that was between a couple close friends and my ex-wife, and it kind of set the tone for this world. So fast forward 20 years, more than 20 years of being a tattoo artist and kind of just setting writing to the side, even though I knew I could really do my own bars if I needed to, through some eulogizing and other writing that I've done. Some people have recognized that I have a little bit of skill of composition. Some professors in college also took note. So I knew this was always a possibility, but the inspiration really wasn't there until 2022, late 2022, when friends I worked with at a warehouse for your favorite online retailer approached me, and after they found out that I was a game master, they asked me to run a game for them, because most of them had never really played any Dungeons & Dragons. A few of them had. But, I knew from before, and I shouldn't have set myself up with all this work that I did with world building and character creation, that players are flaky, and they're like herding cats. So when you have work schedules with opposite days off, getting everybody to agree on even one day where they could get together for an initial gaming session, let alone some kind of schedule every month or two, just became impossible. We never got it off the ground. So here I was left with a big pile of world building and NPCs and, character plot lines and storyline plot lines, and nothing really to do with it. So I'm talking to one of the players who I will also say was the most agreeable to being available at most times to try to play. And he said, well, it sounds to me like you're writing a book. And, without him saying that to me, I would have never done this. So there is really the first inspiration on making this book. So the first thing I tried was a short story called Forever Night, where I really like the idea of undead knights and, noble men with reversed alignments or evil men with reversed alignments, stuff like that. People who aren't a certain way but are compelled to be a gray area character at the very least. So Forever Night was written in 2020, late 2024, October or November. But as I was writing it, the story just kept expanding. I kept wanting to add more of my game NPCs that I'd created to it and turn the story into more than just a short story. And it just blossomed from there. So after writing 5 chapters of this short story, I said, this isn't enough. I can make this story revolve around a whole bunch of other stories in this land and be the focus of one central, bad guy that is causing all these bad things to happen in this cursed kingdom. So you're getting a mix of characters that are local and indigenous to the Dusklands, and then you're getting people from other lands who get involved in this current storyline. But the original story, Forever Night, was partially inspired by a song. And this is where my inspiration talk is coming to you from. I'm trying to give you some ideas of what you hear or what you see is very capable of inspiring some kind of storytelling. Biblically speaking, there's nothing new under the sun. You obviously don't want to blatantly rip off anyone and put your own personal spin on any story, and I think I've done that pretty effectively with custom cultures, the bad guys and the supernatural creatures are pretty original in my world. The story follows 3 or 4 major storylines and will eventually reveal very satisfactorily conclusions that make you say, oh, well, that's why he led me around on this non-linear path to tell me this story. It wasn't just that I wanted to know why this was happening. I wanted a satisfactory reveal, and I'm hoping that the way I tell the story will do that. But the first song that inspired one of my stories was Thule's Blues by Warren Zevon. I wanted to make a cute story about 2 lovers who were facing trials of other arrangements from their parents, but they find a way to get through all of that, get married, and then the love story of being with each other forever and being the perfect couple gets turned on its ear when a war starts, and the husband has to march off to war to defend the Dusklands. So the lyrics of Thule's Blues include a couple of lines that really kind of got to me, and also inspired the name of the female lead in this story, Thule Myers. Now, Thule is a cattail. I believe it's native to California somewhere. And that's why Warren Zevon wrote about it, or used that word as the name of his character of his song. He always wrote about local phenomenon where he lived out in California, contemporary characters in the media. He could very well be my favorite musician and songwriter almost certainly. And there are a few songwriters out there that not only did their songs inspire me, but I want to make a couple of small winks and nudges, homage type mentions of some of their lesser known creations, perhaps, that inspired the stories that I tell. It's pretty weird. I kind of get a little choked up there thinking about all these dead people who wrote songs that inspired the story that I'm writing. So you have Thule's Blues by Warren Zevon, and he mentions being the lead woman's knight in golden armor, and then, you know, time taking over and changing him and changing them, and him having to travel across the deep salt sea to fight, in my case, the story I'm telling, to go off to war, and then everything changes. It's a really cool song, and more than just the name inspired me, it was definitely also a little bit of his storytelling that I said I can take this story, not just expand on it, but turn it on its ear and give it connotations that would happen in dark fantasy. Another one of the songs that I found inspiring to my storytelling was the Silver Ships of Andalar by Townes Van Zandt. It inspired the name of a ruined city in my kingdom of the Dusklands. It's called Andalar, spelled with 2 L's instead of just the one. That was really a unconscious choice of just writing it the way I thought it was, and then going out and finding out later, after I wrote the book, that Andalar of Townes Van Zandt was 1 L. And I'm okay with that. It kind of makes it a little bit more my own. But the inspiration there came from this, you know, mariner culture and, you know, warriors sailing off to stop a dreadful threat to their existence from the north. And I said, well, I already have this character from the past named Kasumat, who was, you know, invading. So why not make him across a frozen ocean, as inspired by the song, and, you know, have men go off to meet him in battle, with some twists of it of my own, but including the desperate times of being on the sea, starving, being restless, being cold. That's a big part of that story, which is 1,300 years in the past. In my history, it's called the Storm Wars, and it's really the watershed between ages, between the first and second age of men. So those two stories, or rather those two songs, were probably most inspirational to me while writing this book. On top of that, the story I had wrote for my players for the Dungeons and Dragons campaign made a nice modern day story that everything else could kind of weave together and lead up to. This is really anthology storytelling. When tasked with a query letter to literary agents, they want to see main characters. So I was met with a little bit of a quandary as I was writing my query letter. Who do I say is the main character? Because I certainly do have several gray area and anti-hero type characters. I also have people who are really good people, like you're seeing one on the screen right now. His name's Ahmed. He's you know, pretty much one of the best people in my story. They call him the smiling one. So there are good people in my story. The Dusklands isn't just chock full of gray area characters, but it's chock full of a lot more gray area situation that these characters have to interact with. So the cause of all the real sorrow and struggle in this cursed land is this character named Dirge, the Herald of Sorrow, and he baits mortals into situations that will lead to great mental anguish and sorrow and suffering, and that is because he feeds off of the sorrow and suffering that people of Dusklander blood experience. It's a curse that he set up 800 or 900 years ago. The exact date is unknown. But the people of the Dusklands who once had this necromantic ability to speak to their lost loved ones and find closure found that he would tax them for doing so. And those people would now be subject to sharing their sorrowful emotions with this demonic necromancer Archon, one of four who haunt the Dusklands and really kind of, in a petty way, interact with the people for all their own purposes. But this guy is the most powerful out of an unbalancing of the four, and the worst of all of them. So my quandary was solved. Instead of making some kind of heroic POV, we have a character who kind of shows up when tragedy happens so he can reap the rewards. And he is the unifying theme, besides the Dusklands themselves, through every story. So in a brilliant kind of moment I had at 4:30 in the morning this morning, I decided that after the book was written, I finally know who the main character is. It's Dirge, the Herald of Sorrow, or at least when submitting it to literary agents who need to get a real grasp of what's going on in the story. So I have all these characters. The non-linear storytelling happens over several time periods that I've kind of carved out for the storytelling. One being, of course, modern storytelling in the current day, which would be the year 1313, Age of Armak, for anybody who likes calendars. But beyond that, also as well, in addition, I've got stories from, I don't know, about 10 years prior. It's a little bit of a range. It happens within about a year and a half of a decade previous to the modern story. And I also have stories from about 30 years before. They're few, but there's a few of them that are coming. Not any in the first book. And as well, not any in the first book, but I will have stories from the end of the Storm Wars and the Age of Armak that will explain why certain things, including the influence of the Herald of Sorrow, exist in the modern story. Finally, I will have one story that will come that will be like, hey, this is the original, the starting story, the origin of the Dusklander people themselves. And that reveal will be coming later, because otherwise it will spoil a couple of the story reveals too soon. But I think it's an interesting story, and I can't wait to tell that one. I've already made a lot of notes about the different characters and such. None of the other inspirations of the book come from real audio media. Of course, I'm inspired by authors that I read. I have to kind of come out here now and talk about a few of the authors that really paved the way for me. Obviously, J.R.R. Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings, George R.R. Martin and A Song of Ice and Fire, and of course the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms books. Pardon me. Maybe we can edit that cough out later, but maybe we'll leave it for realism. So what we're looking at is inspiration by authors. I think my favorite author probably in the whole world is Carl Edward Wagner. Mostly he did a lot of contemporary horror shorts featuring the South of the United States. Tennessee is where he lived. And but he also wrote about a character named Cain from his Cain Chronicles, which is really good dark fantasy, kind of a murder hobo, based off of the real Cain, who everywhere he's cursed and everywhere he goes, just shit falls apart. And I love those stories, and I love Carl's horror shorts. He had one that he wrote called Styx that is maybe the best short story I've ever read. I can read it maybe 100 times. I love the entire atmosphere of the story, the haunted artist. It really is my favorite story of all time. And just really close behind, we've got Robert W. Chambers, who wrote all the King in Yellow mythology, and he has one short story in the King in Yellow, and it's called The Yellow Sign. And it's hard for me to choose between that and Styx as my two favorite stories, but my influence is heavily steeped in horror and horror short stories, eldritch horror, cosmic horror. H.P. Lovecraft, of course, is right up there with influences of what I'm doing in my book, as well as some of the other Lovecraft mythos writers, like August Derleth and I don't know. Insert any of the Cthulhu authors here, but really the three biggest influences in horror for me have to be, of course, Edgar Allan Poe, and then Robert W. Chambers, and then Carl Edward Wagner. H.P. Lovecraft coming in and kind of a fourth. Of course, I love tentacles. Everybody loves tentacles. I'm going to wrap this up saying that inspiration kind of came from unexpected places. Of course, one man, Luke, telling me that I'm writing a book now really kind of propelled me into crafting my storylines and making an outline. But I hit a rut, and that rut really kind of said, do I really want to write this? I've got a lot of barriers to success, as everyone does. I have never been published. Maybe I'm just wasting my time. There's a lot of self-doubt and stuff like that. And a coworker approached me out of the blue, knowing that I wanted to write this thing, but I hadn't really gotten too far with it. And he's like, how's it going with that? And I was like, I haven't done anything with it in a couple months. Not really. A couple notes, that's about it. And he's like, well, I really want to see that thing get done. And, what you've told me about the story, it's really interesting to me. And having the confidence of one person, just one person, saying they're really interested in the story as I've explained it, in our talks, it made all the difference in the world. And that weekend I went home and my brain was on fire. I mean, the story just exploded. I probably wrote 130 pages, manuscript pages. So God, like 260 book pages or something like that, at 250 words a page. I just went nuts that weekend, and it was the stepping stone and the encouragement that I needed. And it was from somebody who wasn't necessarily the best friend in the world, but an interested enough coworker and friend that it meant more than maybe a friend saying something like that. Because if you think about it, like your best friends are going to be like your mom hanging your art project on on her refrigerator, and of course she's proud of it. She loves you, and your friends love you. But it's the opinion of people who are not so close to you and interested in the things that you're writing that encourage you, that could possibly be the most inspiration of all. Well, that's my talk, and I hope you guys got something out of it. And don't forget that the Moon and Dragons Lament Book 1 is coming. Just here in the next couple months, one way or the other, we're going to get this thing out so you guys can read it. I'll talk to you all soon.